you Live inside Chase Field, we're getting ready for baseball. Stepping into the box, Chris Taylor. And we are set for baseball here this evening.
Center fielder, Chris Taylor.
Here comes the first pitch. Underway now in the Valley of the Sun as the first pitch of the night is taken for ball one. And back-to-back pitches out of the zone to begin the evening. It's 2-0 now. Weather shouldn't be much of a factor. 71 degrees here at game time. In the dirt, it's 3-0 now. And a good comeback there. It's 3-1.
Finally got one over. Nothing worse than starting the game with a 4-pitch walk.
Line drive to center field. And that finds some outfield grass. It's a base hit. So the leadoff man reaches base to start out the first. Digging in, David Peralta. He'll get to take his first cuts here. First delivery to him on the way. He's running. High fly ball out to straightaway center. Dyson's there. One down. So digging in now, Jet Jerko, as he'll get his first opportunity in this one. Ready to deliver. Here's the first pitch. A pitch out. The throw. Throw won't get him. Taylor, the runner at first with one gone in the inning. Runner going a second time. A pitch out. The throw. Throw won't get him. Running yet again for second. Swing, and there it goes. Deep to left field. See you later. Over the wall, a home run. Here's the catcher, Brian McCann. Infield in the overshift here. Now the pitch. The fastball here as he'll take a look at ball one. 1-0. Right on that pitch that time as he wraps it into center field. A base hit. Whit Merrifield next to hit. First shot for him here with a runner at first now and one away. First offering on its way. Runner goes for second. Offered at and missed. Here's the throw. And they've got the runner hung up between first and second. And now he throws on the brakes, but he can't get back to first, and he's nailed for the second out. Big mistake there. The windup and the 0-1. Line drive to left. Peralta is there, and he'll make the... Here's Gerard Dyson. He'll lead things off here in the bottom half of the first.
Leading out for the Diamondbacks.
And the pitch.
Gerard Dyson.
Now a bunt attempt here. This gets foul. It's 0-1. Nothing in one count. Here it comes. High in the air out to center field. Zobrist is there, and that's the first out of the inning. Ready now for the Diamondbacks, David Peralta.
David Peralta.
And that's in there for strike one.
One thing I'm going to keep my eye on with this young starter on the mound is how he's able to stay ahead of hitters. It makes pitching at this level a lot easier. And when you're trying to establish yourself in the big leagues, you're going to have a much better time doing that if you attack hitters from the get-go.
The 0-2 once more. Is taken. That's ball one.
Boy, that's a great breaking ball right there. That's a tough pitch to lay off when that ball is coming in at that plane right there. Quality take.
And that is down, as that could be two bases. And he's in there easily at second with a one-out double. A man at second with one down. And stepping in, the power-hitting first baseman, Paul Goldschmidt. And the indication from the dugout comes, it looks like they're going to put him on intentionally. So that'll set up the double play possibility with one away. A one pitch on its way. Skied in the air to straightaway left. Peralta's after it. And he brings it in for the second out of the inning. Up next for Arizona, A.J. Pollock. Iwakuma comes set. Here's the first pitch. And he takes a pitch right down the middle. The 0-2 home. And a sinking fastball that stayed a little high, apparently.
Boy, that's a great take right there. He might have been frozen by that pitch.
And we'll have to leave it there as the play is made here to end the inning. In now, Justin Bohr. He'll get us started in the top of the second.
First baseman, Justin Bohr.
First pitch coming. Here it is. A shot to second base and handled for the first out. So one away here with the bases empty and set to go now is the shortstop Ben Zobrist. Hit out towards second. Throw on to first, 2 gone. Settling in now, Lucas Duda. He'll work on keeping this top of the second alive. Infield shifted well to the right. Here's the first pitch. Now a cutter, but that's in the dirt for a ball. That's 2-1.
You know, what I'm seeing here is a reluctance to throw the fastball. It's like he feels he can't throw the ball right by him right now.
Just got it. And this is going to wind up hitting the bag at third. And that's through for a hit. And he goes to second with it. The tag, and they'll get him at second. Here's the catcher, Alex Avila. He'll start us out here in the home half of the second.
Catcher, Alex Avila.
Right down Broadway that time. Strike one.
That pitch was right down the heart of the plate, but obviously this guy had made up his mind on the on-deck circle.
And he goes the other way as this is hit high and deep out to straightaway left. And this ball is gone. No chance to make a play on that one. He's ready. Here's the first offering. Comes right after him with a fastball for a strike. Behind 0-2 now. And he fights him off here to foul this one over toward the right side, and it'll remain 0-2. Chopped weakly to the left. There to play it is Zobrist. Throw on to first, so a good comeback there as he gets the first out of the inning. First offering on its way. Pulled toward right center field. On the move is Taylor. And that's the second out of the inning. Chris Owings will get the call here as he'll hit for the pitcher.
Number 16, Chris Owings.
And that misses inside 1-0. The 1-0. There's a swing and a drive hit well out to right field. Duda going back, but he can't get to this one. It's off the wall. Around second. He's on his way to third. And he is into third with a 2-out triple. So striding in, Gerard Dyson, as he's got a chance to tie this ball game up with that equalizing run just 90 feet away at third.
Your attention, please.
And a new pitcher set to come on now as they turn things over to the finesse left-hander J.P. Howell. Drops in a strike to start the at-bat. 0-1. Sinker stayed high but called for a strike.
He certainly
got him looking, and that.
Now pitching for the Diamondbacks, number 48, Randall Del.
Nomar Mazara will grab a bat and hit for the pitcher here. Lifted down the line in left. And that's going to be a base hit. So a great job off the bench, and he's aboard here to lead off the inning. Striding in once again, Chris Taylor. Raimel Tapia will be summoned now to be the pinch runner.
Number 15,
First pitch of the at-bat on its way. This is in the air out to straightaway center. Dyson has to roam straight back, but he has it for the first out. And now this is thrown wildly, just getting it into the infield. Ready for another chance? David Peralta. He flew out in his last at-bat. Here comes the first pitch. Runners off for second. This one is fouled away up to the concourse area. He's set. Here's the 0-1. He's on the move again from first. Hit on the ground down the first baseline. Again, he's off for second. Pitch is high. The throw in time as he just gets the tag down. A 2-1 score here as we play inning number 3. There's a swing and a high deep drive headed for the right field corner. And that's going to wind up hooking just a bit foul, so a missed opportunity there. The 1-2. Started to go. So look for
Your attention, please. Now pitching, Hector Rondon.
Striding into the box, David Peralta. It was a double for him in his first turn at the plate. 1 ball, no strikes to count. There's a swing and a missile sent out to center field. Back goes Taylor to the track. On the warning track, he makes the catch. Here's Paul Goldschmidt now. His first plate appearance resulted in an intentional walk. Starts him out with a slider too low for ball 1. And he won't bite at that one either. It's 2-0. And he's in front of a tight little slider that time. Rondon is at least partially known for his big power slider. A lot of break on that pitch, but there's a swing and a high drive into left center field. That one is out of here. This game is tied. First offering on its way. Swing and a line drive. And that's a base hit. 1 for 2 in his first couple of plate appearances. Now to the plate, A.J. Pollock. He's got a chance to end this one and send these fans home happy if he can get a ball deep enough into the gap. No balls and a strike to count. Pulls this one in the air out to left. Under it is Zobrist. 2 away now. Trying to pick things up where he left off, Alex Avila. And he's off to a hot start in this one. Homered his first time around. 0-0 in 1 count. Here it comes. Called strike over the outside part of the plate. The slider freezes him at the... Digging in to try it again, Jed Jerko.
Leading off with a 51. Third baseman, Jed Jerko.
First pitch of the at-bat. Hit hard down the line. And that's through for a hit. Stepping in and ready for another shot, Brian McCann. Go ahead run at first. Nobody out. Addison Russell will come on now and pinch run here.
Number 27, Addison Russell.
First pitch coming. Here it is. Pitch outside. The throw. And it's far too late as he steals second with ease. And 2-0 now as this misses below the knees.
Well, 2-0 now, and this is where he makes his money. If he gets a pitch to hack at, you can bet he's not going to hold back.
High pop-up. And Goldschmidt able to put the squeeze on it here. 1 away. With Merrifield next to him. And he could very well get the intentional pass here as that would set up a potential double play ball that might keep the game tied. And a fastball just below the knees, ball 1. The 1-0 is taken for ball 2. Now the 2-0. A bouncer to the left side. Ahmed has it. And there's out number 2. Digging in for his second at-bat, Justin Bohr hit it hard but lined out in his first at-bat. First pitch on its way. And there's one well above the zone for a ball. Sent on the ground out to second. Marte has it. Throwing the dirt, but a good scoop at first. Now at the plate, Nick Ahmed. He's 0 for 1 after grounding out in his only trip to the plate so far. 0-1 the count. Changed up on him as this is grounded to second. Merrifield brings it in, and there's one away. Into the box, Ketel Marte comes into this at-bat 0 for 1 in the ballgame. Good hard slider there, but it runs away. It's a ball and a strike.
Backdoor breaking ball just missed right there. It's such an effective pitch if you can hit the corner with it, but no dice this time.
Count even at 2-2. And a swing and a miss as they got him with the slider there, 2 away. Daniel Descalso will get the call to pinch hit here as we'll see what he can do with 2 out and the base is empty. And here's a fastball inside as the count moves to 2-0 now. Hard hit ball to second. Merrifield picks it up. Throw to first in plenty of time. And
now pitching for the Diamondbacks, number 50.
Ben Zobrist will be the first one to greet him as he'll have to turn around and bat from the right side of the plate here.
Now playing
first pitch on its way. Now a check swing, but he holds up in time. Ball 1.
Wow, how about that? He was tempted to make a swing at that pitch right there. That was way out of the zone, but he just kept his hands back enough.
That evens it up 1-1. Pulled high in the air out to left field. Ahmed over to his right. 1 away. Now at the plate, Lucas Duda. He was cut down at second, attempting to stretch a base hit his first time through. From the stretch. That's smoked, but right into the shift. Marte gloves it on to first, and there were 2 down.
The pitcher number 30.
Now to the plate, the pitcher, Hector Rondon. First at-bat of the game for him here in the 5th as he was a late entrant into this one. First pitch of the AB is swung on and lifted in the air to straightaway center. Dyson. Here's Gerard Dyson. He was sent packing on strikes in his last trip. First pitch of the at-bat on its way. Takes a look at one catching the outside corner. A swinging strike, and now it's 0-2. Too high. 1-2.
Wow, that's a tough pitch to take. 0-2 fastball just off the corner, and I mean just off the corner.
Taylor comes on now, and he has it 1 down. Coming to the plate now, David Peralta. A hit in 2 tries for him so far.
Now pitching.
First pitch of the at-bat. Missed with a slider. 2 runs, 5 hits. No errors so far for the Diamondbacks. Weakly hit towards first. And he'll step on first himself for the out. So bases are empty here with 2 gone. And stepping in, the power-hitting first baseman, Paul Goldschmidt. In there, and it's 0-1. Into the windup, here comes the 0-1. Line toward right center. And that'll get down for a 2-out single. So that extends the inning and gives Jake Lamb an opportunity with 2 out. The tag. So the lineup flips over and digging in, Chris Taylor. He'll start things out now in the top half of the 6th. First pitch of the at-bat. Tough slider down low for a strike.
You know, guys, sometimes guys don't like pulling the trigger 0-0. They want to see something go by, calibrate the speed, calibrate the break, and then make their adjustments off that. Maybe that's the case right here.
Throw, got him, and that's a gorgeous play.
Now batting.
Ready for another chance? David Peralta. He was punched out looking at strike 3 last time through. Here's the first pitch to him. And this one's nowhere close as that bounces to the plate for ball 1. Now the 1-0. Sent on the ground out to second. Marte fields it cleanly. And a low throw to first that bounces as he can't hang on. Standing in, Addison Russell. He's getting his first plate appearance of the game here in the 6th. First pitch on its way. Peralta's on the move. Left side. And that's the second out. Riding in once again, Brian McCann, runner in scoring position with Sudan. Hoping to keep it tied. Here it comes. Fastball that just misses inside.
That pitch right there, he's trying to keep him from getting his arms extended. If it's out over the plate more, he can.
There's a swing, and he sends a ball high in the air into left field. And it would have been trouble, but a great. Jake Lamb standing in now. A fly out and a single for him so far. Now a drive to right. Well, the clear skies. Stepping into the box, Chris Taylor. And we are ready for some daytime baseball.
Center fielder, Chris
First pitch of the at-bat on its way. Hit in the air to right field. Pollock on the run. He's there and records the first out. Settling in now, David Peralta. He'll get to take his first cuts here. First offering on its way. Line towards center field. And he will make the play out there, and there are two away now. Stepping into the box, Jed Jerko. First chance for him here in the top of the first with nobody on. Hit in the air to center field. Dyson on the run. He makes the play, and that'll end the inning. So digging in now, Gerard Dyson. He'll lead things off here in the bottom half of the first. First pitch on its way. Leaves a slider up high, but it's taken for a strike. Looks at a slider over the outer half for strike two.
So back-to-back sliders for strikes. Does he come back with yet another?
Normally not a good pitching plan to throw the same hitter the same pitch 3 times in a row. But both of those sliders back-to-back were so good, I might just go ahead and try to throw another one.
And there's out number 2. Here's Paul Goldschmidt now.
First baseman, Paul Goldschmidt.
First offering on its way. Missed with a breaking ball. The 1-0. Misses for the second ball. Goldschmidt is one of the few true superstar hitters in the game. You're no doubt aware of it, but it doesn't matter who he's facing. He's a major league threat to hit the ball hard somewhere just about every time he steps into the box.
Yeah, one of the best hitters and truly blessed by the gods, but I don't think people realize the amount of time and effort this guy has put into honing his craft to become one of the great hitters in our sport.
And the inning will continue as that's through for a 2-out hit. He'll get it into second. And he is safe at second base as he legs out a double. Comes set. Here's the 0-0 pitch. And there's one well above the zone for a ball. And that's inside. Looked like the slider, and it's 2-0. Gets the call on the changeup there. 2-1.
That's an impressive pitch right there. If you're willing to throw a changeup on 2-0, that tells me
threw it right past. So now it'll be the 4-hole hitter, Brian McCann. He'll get us started in the top of the second. Infield in the overshift here. Now the pitch. It's a high fly ball headed for the left field corner. If it stays fair, it's gone. Nearly a big fly to start the inning. Instead, a foul ball. Swing, line drive. That's going to be trouble. McCann on his way to second now. And he will coast into second with a leadoff double. Coming to the plate now, Whit Merrifield. And he could give his guys an early lead if he can come through here. From the belt, kicks and deals. Chopped weakly to the left. He's got to hurry. Oh, he tries to force it into second, and it's too late. Into the box, Justin Bohr.
First baseman, Justin Bohr.
First delivery to him on the way. Now a bunt attempt here. Throw on to first, so the sacrifice is successful. Stepping up now, Ben Zobrist. He'll swing it from the left side right here. First pitch of the at-bat. Smoke the other way, high and deep to left. Peralta going back. Gone! Digging in, Lucas Duda. Ready with the first pitch. Here it comes. Bunt attempt here as he gets this one down. Throw to first is going to beat him, though, as they're able to thwart the bunt attempt. Next to hit will be the pitcher, Bob Gibson, as he'll get his first opportunity in this one. Now a bunt attempt here. But the throw will beat him at first. So coming to the plate, A.J. Pollock, as they'll have 5, 6, and 7 here to start the home half of the second. Now here's a shot out toward the gap in right center. Around first, digging for 2. And he'll get there as the Diamondbacks get a man into scoring position on the leadoff double. Now at the plate, Alex Avila. From the stretch, here's the pitch. And that one stayed too low, apparently.
Can't imagine he comes back with a third breaking ball. That hitter looked like he timed that one up pretty well and just missed it, fouling it away.
A 2-ball, 2-strike count to the Diamondbacks catcher.
That's a real tough pitch to hit. That's in the pitcher's jargon, we call that the Hall of Fame pitch, that slider down and in. Really, the only way you're going to be able to hit that pitch is if you're looking for it down and in, and still then, it's a really difficult pitch to hit.
Throw, got him, and that's a gorgeous play. Lay off the fastball here in a good spot, but ruled the ball 1-0. Duda is in pursuit, and the inning is over. Stepping in and ready for another shot, Chris Taylor. He'll step in to lead it off in the top of the third. And he can't get out of the way there, so the leadoff man will be aboard to open up the inning. Ready now, David Peralta. Hit it hard but lined out in his first at-bat. Here's the first pitch to him. Now the bunt attempt hits him here, but they're going to say he offered at it, and that's the first strike. Throw over to first, and the runner back easily. Taylor aboard here at first with nobody out. And a bunt attempt misses, and we'll see how they play it down 0-2. And they do have him squaring with 2 strikes as he gets this one down. Oh, and it eats him up a bit. Here's Jed Jerko now.
Now batting, third baseman, Jed Jerko.
Here's the first pitch to him. Rare display of small ball here as he puts this one down. Only played at first, so the sacrifice works that time. Digging in to try it again, Brian McCann. He scored a run after stroking a double in his first at-bat. He's set, here it comes. And now the runner breaks for the plate. Now a bunt attempt here. So they get the out at first, but the run will score on the suicide squeeze. With Merrifield next to hit. Although there are a couple of bases open, and we'll see if they think about working around him. First pitch of the at-bat on its way. Now a bunt attempt here. Throw to first in time, and you got a question. Chris Owings will get the call here as he'll hit for the pitcher.
Number 16, Brent.
In there, strike one. And they've got some work to do early on. Down 4-0 already. Drilled to the right side. Merrifield scoops it up, and the inning begins with a quick out number 1. Here's Gerard Dyson. 0 for 1 for him here in this one. And he'll power in a fastball that time at 94 for strike 1.
There's a called strike on a fastball up in the zone. We're seeing more of that from pitchers nowadays. With the launch angles, guys are looking for the ball down in the zone. If a pitcher can pitch up in the zone, like that pitch right there, you can go ahead and make some hay.
Throw to first will get him as they pounce on it quickly to snuff out the bunt attempt. And that one just missed outside.
Well, that's a pretty good pitch right there, that backdoor slider. That's a very difficult pitch to throw, and particularly throw for a strike. Just missed that outside corner right there, but a good pitch and a tough take there by the hitter.
And the slider's in the dirt as he lays off it for a ball. Arizona down to its last strike. Popped him up. And that'll do it as he puts the squeeze on that one, and with a whimper there, that will be the final out of the ball game. Well, we've talked about it.